There was this guy at the dog park who always seemed to show up at the same time as me. I didn't think much of it at first. A lot of people are creatures of habit, especially when it comes to their dogs. I went every weekday morning around 7:30 before work, and so did a lot of the regulars. We'd give each other the classic silent nod of acknowledgement, let our dogs run wild, and then go about our day. But this guy, he stood out. He was tall, lean, mid-30s maybe, with this kind of quiet confidence. Black hoodie, joggers, always dressed like he actually ran for fun, not just because his dog needed exercise. His dog was a brown rescue mutt with one floppy ear and an endless supply of energy. Mine, a grumpy old bulldog named Gus, wasn't exactly a social butterfly, but even he seemed intrigued by the guy's dog. I didn't know his name at first. I just called him Dog Park Hoodie Guy in my head, but then he started showing up more, at the grocery store, twice in 1 week, once near the apples, once behind me in line. At a cafe I worked from sometimes, I saw him walking past the window with a coffee in hand, glancing in, then pausing like he'd seen someone familiar. He didn't come in though. Just kept walking. The weirdest one? He was at the DMV. Same day. Same line. He gave me a quick smile like it was funny we were both there. And yeah, maybe it was. But I couldn't ignore the chill crawling up my spine. That night, I told my friend Lucas about it over drinks. Maybe he just lives nearby, Lucas said, sipping his beer. Or maybe, he grinned, maybe he's into you. I rolled my eyes. Yeah, because following someone to the DMV is hot, Lucas shrugged. People do dumb shit when they're into someone. Maybe he's trying to work up the nerve to talk to you. He's had 3 weeks of dog park mornings to do that. Maybe he's shy. Or a serial killer. Lucas raised a brow. Cute serial killer, though. I laughed, but the truth was, I didn't know how to feel about it. Was it flattering? Creepy? Coincidence? The next morning at the park, I tried not to look for him, but there he was. Right on time. Hoodie. Coffee. Same dog. Running circles around Gus like he was trying to revive his spirit. This time, he walked over. You mind if I sit? He asked, nodding toward the bench I was on. I shrugged. Sure. We sat in silence for a minute. I watched Gus try and fail to hop up on a log. The guy sipped his coffee. Then he said, Your dog's name is Gus, right? I turned to him, eyebrows raised. Yeah. He smiled, just a little. He growled at my dog like 2 weeks ago. It was kind of iconic, I snorted. Yeah, he's a grump. He's only nice to mailmen for some reason. Everyone else, total menace. He nodded, looking out over the field. I'm Jamie, by the way. Mark. We shook hands. His grip was warm, steady. There was another pause. Not awkward, just curious, like he was waiting for something. Then he said, I think I've seen you around. That coffee shop on 3rd. You work there? No, I work from there sometimes. Freelance, graphic design. He nodded like that made sense. Cool. I do contract work too. Tech stuff. Yeah, so you just happen to be everywhere I go? Jamie laughed under his breath, looking a little sheepish. Okay, yeah, I was wondering when you'd say something. I narrowed my eyes. You're following me? Not exactly, he said. Okay, kind of. I blinked. You kind of followed me to the DMV? Jamie held up a hand like he was surrendering. I swear, I'm not a stalker. He ran a hand through his hair, clearly embarrassed. Okay, this is gonna sound insane, but my friend saw you at the dog park a while ago and told me I had to talk to you. Said you were my type. So I came back the next day and kept showing up. I stared at him, not sure whether to laugh or run. Jamie shrugged, forcing a smile. Then, I saw you were cute. Like, actually cute. And it just snowballed. I raised an eyebrow. So instead of talking to me like a normal person, you decided to turn it into a rom-com stalker plot? He winced. Okay, when you say it like that, it sounds bad. It is bad. But you're still talking to me, he pointed out. And annoyingly, he was right. I didn't know what to say after that. The honesty threw me. I expected him to deflect or laugh it off. Instead, Jamie looked right at me with that half smile, like he knew exactly how ridiculous it sounded, but wasn't trying to lie his way out of it. "Okay," I finally said, arms crossed. "So let me get this straight. Your friend saw me at the dog park, told you to hit on me, and instead of just doing that, you decided to become a part-time private investigator?" Jamie laughed under his breath. "When you say it like that, yeah, I hear it. It's weird. Kind of. But I swear, I wasn't like following you home or anything. I just noticed you." He looked away then, out toward the field where Gus and Scout were now laying side by side in the dirt like old buddies. "I'm bad at this stuff," he said. "I thought if I ran into you a few times, we'd talk. Naturally, like people do." "That's what the dog park is for," I said. Deadpan. Jamie gave a half smile, tapping his coffee cup against his knee. "You were always wearing earbuds. You didn't look like you wanted to talk." That part was true. I'd gotten used to flying under the radar. The earbuds weren't always on, just a way to wall myself off a little. Not because I was unfriendly, but because I didn't want the awkward small talk with strangers who only wanted to comment on my dog's wrinkly face or ask if he snored like a freight train. He does. But now, sitting there beside this guy who apparently noticed all of that and still kept showing up, I didn't feel like being closed off. "So what's your type?" I asked after a second. Jamie blinked. "What?" "You said I was your type." He paused, then chuckled. "Direct," I shrugged. "I think I'm owed at least a little explanation. You did crash my grocery store, DMV, and morning routine. Fair enough." He leaned back slightly, arms crossed. "Okay. Type. I don't know, it's not a checklist. You looked." He hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. "Normal. Comfortable in your skin. Like you weren't trying too hard. And Gus too. Just vibing. Quietly. You fell for my dog." "Little bit," he admitted with a grin. I shook my head, but the corner of my mouth tugged upward despite myself. "You could have just said hi. I'm saying it now." I looked over at him. Jamie had that kind of posture that suggested calm, but there was a nervous energy in the way his fingers tapped the side of his coffee cup. Not cocky, not even all that smooth. Just honest. And I had to admit, this was the most interesting conversation I'd had with a stranger in a while. "You said you do tech stuff?" I asked. "Yeah. Freelance backend work. Databases. Cloud infrastructure. Mostly startups. Sounds overwhelming. Depends on the client. Sometimes I feel like I'm explaining routers to houseplants." He smirked. "Other times, it's pretty chill." I nodded. "I do branding and UX design." His eyebrows lifted. "Seriously?" "Yeah. So you and I could actually work together." "I guess so," I said. "If you ever need ugly software to look less like a car crash, I'm your guy." Jamie laughed. "I'm putting that in my next client pitch." We talked for a while after that. Nothing deep. Just work, dogs. The best tacos within walking distance of the park. And for the first time since I'd moved to this neighborhood, I realized I actually liked talking to someone local. Someone I didn't already know from work or from the sanitized world of dating apps, where everything starts with bios and ends with awkward ghosting. This was different. Unplanned. Unpolished. And yeah, a little weird. But I was kind of into it. Eventually, I checked my watch. "I should head out. Gus needs a bath." "Again?" Jamie nodded, standing with me. "Mind if I walk with you?" I hesitated, but only for a second. "Sure." We left the park side by side, our dogs walking just ahead, tails wagging, sniffing everything in sight. It felt weirdly domestic, like we'd done this before. As we reached the corner where I usually turned left toward my place, Jamie slowed. "I'm not going to follow you all the way home," he said with a half smile, trying to cut back. I huffed a laugh. "Thanks. Appreciate the restraint." He scratched the back of his neck. "But, would you maybe want to grab coffee sometime? Like, not accidentally?" I looked at him. He didn't seem like he was trying to be slick or clever, just asking. "Yeah," I said. "I think I'd like that." Jamie smiled, pulling his phone from his pocket. "Cool. Want to swap numbers?" We did, and it felt simple in the best way. After we parted, I watched him walk off in the opposite direction, Scout trotting beside him. He glanced back once, caught me looking, and gave a little wave. That night, Gus was passed out in a towel, snoring like a trucker, and I was lying on the couch, staring at my ceiling, trying not to read too much into a casual dog park conversation. But I couldn't help wondering what would have happened if I hadn't looked up when he first said hi, if I'd kept my earbuds in, or walked out of the DMV just a little earlier. Because now, I wasn't just curious about Jamie, I was kind of looking forward to seeing him again. I didn't expect to hear from him the same day. It was around 6 p.m. when my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. "Jamie, if I said I'm walking by the taco place we talked about and just happened to be hungry, would that be weird?" I stared at the screen for a second, lips twitching. "Only if you pretend it's another coincidence, Jamie." Damn it. And I had a whole story ready about a lost dog leading me here. Bring the dog next time. Gus would respect the hustle. He didn't respond right away, which gave me a minute to think, was I really doing this? Meeting a guy the first barely knew for dinner, not even 12 hours after our first actual conversation? My instinct would usually be to let things breathe a little. But something about Jamie made that logic feel unnecessary. When he texted again 5 minutes later with, "There's a patio table with your name on it," I didn't even bother making an excuse. I grabbed my jacket, whistled at Gus, and headed out. The taco place wasn't far, just a little corner spot with mismatched chairs and homemade salsa that came in old mason jars. I saw Jamie right away, sitting at a table near the street with a bottle of Mexican Coke in hand. Scout was lying under his chair like he belonged there. Jamie looked up, smiled. That was fast. I lived dangerously close. Then I picked the perfect stalking radius. I rolled my eyes, but sat down. Gus waddled over and flopped beside Scout with a grunt. Jamie grinned. He's consistent. We ordered tacos. Mine al pastor, his carne asada, and a side of chips. The conversation came easy again, even with cars rolling past, and a table of loud college kids nearby. We talked about worst job clients, favorite random movies, and how neither of us really did apps anymore. "They're just exhausting," Jamie said, wiping salsa from his mouth. "You spend half your time building a fake version of yourself, just to match with someone who's doing the same thing," I nodded. "And then if it doesn't click in 5 minutes, it's like, next. Everything feels disposable." "Exactly," he looked at me. "This is nicer." I didn't say anything right away. I just held his gaze a little longer than usual, because I agreed, but hearing him say it made something shift. Like this wasn't just flirting anymore. He was putting something real on the table. "You know," he said after a beat, "I almost gave up on talking to you." "Oh?" "You looked kind of untouchable," he said. "Not in a bad way. Just, I don't know, like you had your own thing going. Like if I said the wrong thing, you'd give me a tight smile and go back to your podcast." I smirked. "I do that with most people. But not with me. Not yet." He raised an eyebrow. "That's promising." We finished eating, and neither of us made a move to leave. There wasn't that usual end-of-the-date stiffness, where someone checks their phone and pretends they forgot they have to get up early. We just kept talking, until the staff started wiping down tables and stacking chairs. Eventually we stood. Scout stretched dramatically. Gus snored once, then stumbled to his feet. We walked together down the street, toward the split where our apartments were in opposite directions. Jamie stopped when we reached the corner. "I know this is fast," he said, scratching the back of his neck, "but I'm glad I ran into you," I chuckled. "You didn't run into me." "Okay, fine. I planned a whole tactical approach that involved DMV lines and pet-friendly cafes. And you're just laying it all out, huh?" I told myself I'd be upfront, even if it makes me look ridiculous. I looked at him. "You don't look ridiculous," he smiled. "Good." Then, for a second, he just stood there like he wanted to say more. But instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded napkin. He handed it to me. "Just in case you need a reminder, this was real." I unfolded it. It was a doodle, quick and messy, of Gus and Scout sitting next to each other like two weird-shaped clouds. Above them, in shaky handwriting, "First date vibes." I looked up at him, genuinely laughing. "Wow, a napkin cartoon." "Limited edition," he said. "I only make one per week." I folded it again, slower this time, and tucked it into my jacket pocket. Then I surprised both of us. I leaned in and kissed him. Not long, not dramatic, just enough to feel the warmth of him, the sudden stillness that hit mid-sentence, and the press of his fingers brushing against mine. When I stepped back, he blinked, stunned, but not in a bad way. "I wasn't expecting that," he said. I shrugged. "You're not the only one who does things fast." He laughed softly, then ran his hand through his hair like he needed a second to reset. "Okay," he said. "I'm gonna try and play it cool, but that just made my week." I smiled. "Good night, Jamie." "Night, Mark." I walked home with Gus trotting at my side, napkins still tucked safe in my pocket. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to overthink any of it. The next morning, I woke up thinking maybe I dreamt it. The taco date, the napkin doodle, that quick kiss at the corner. It felt too clean, too easy, like something out of one of those indie romantic comedies I never admit I watch. But then I rolled over, saw the napkin sticking out of my jacket on the chair, and remembered everything in full detail. Gus snored from the foot of my bed, completely unfazed. He didn't care that his owner had just had one of the most unexpectedly good nights in months. I rubbed my eyes, sat up slowly, and stared at my phone like it might do something. It did. About 10 seconds later, it lit up. Jamie. Scout says he thinks Gus is a bad influence. He's been refusing his breakfast until I put peanut butter on it. Gus says Scout needs to develop a better sense of taste. Also, peanut butter is sacred. Jamie, he's now demanding a walk to the exact bush he peed on yesterday. This is getting out of hand. You created this monster. Good luck. I smiled, tossing my phone onto the bed. That was the start of our messaging spiral. It didn't stop for the rest of the day. We didn't talk about anything profound, just dumb stuff. How Jamie's upstairs neighbor vacuumed at 11 p.m., how Gus had somehow gotten peanut butter on my sock, how Netflix really needed to stop suggesting teen dramas with 35-year-olds pretending to be high school sophomores. Every few hours, he'd pop up on my screen. Every time, I'd feel that subtle hit of something I hadn't realized I'd missed. Presence. Connection. Someone paying attention. By the end of the week, we'd seen each other 3 more times. Once at the dog park, once for coffee, and then again on Friday night when he texted. I know this is fast, but I have leftover pasta and a need to prove I'm a decent cook. You in? Of course I was in. I didn't even hesitate. His apartment was similar to mine. Older building, slightly creaky floors, character in the good and bad sense. He had a wall of books and a mess of tangled charging cords on the counter. Scout greeted me like we'd known each other forever, and Jamie handed me a glass of red wine before I even sat down. I only cooked half of this, he said, stirring something on the stove. The rest came from a jar. If it sucks, lie to me. It smells amazing, I said, and meant it. It wasn't a date. Not formally. But we both knew it kind of was. We ate on his couch, bowls in our laps, a random playlist filling the space between bites. The food was actually good, slightly too salty, but comforting. He had this little laugh he did when he was proud of himself but trying to act chill about it, and I heard it twice over dinner. After we finished, I helped him with dishes, and then we ended up back on the couch, closer this time, his arm barely brushing mine, my knee angled toward his. Something shifted in the air, subtle but sure. So, he said, tipping his glass toward me, are you always this calm about being stalked? I laughed. Only when the stalker has a good-looking dog. Ouch. And makes decent pasta, he smiled. You didn't even flinch when I told you that I'd been noticing you for weeks. Most people would have called a hotline. Yeah, I said, but you didn't feel dangerous, just persistent. I didn't want to be creepy. I just thought. He paused. You seemed like someone I'd want to know. There it was again, that plain-spoken honesty. No games, no posturing. It disarmed me. Guess it worked, I said. Jamie looked at me for a long second. Then, slowly, carefully, he reached out and touched my knee, just his fingertips. No pressure, like he was asking for permission without saying a word. I didn't pull away. Instead, I leaned toward him, and this time when we kissed, it wasn't quick or awkward or rushed. It was quiet, warm, familiar in a strange, brand new way. His hand slid to my thigh. My palm rested on the side of his neck. We stayed like that for a while, just kissing, slow and unhurried, like neither of us had anywhere to be. And for the first time in ages, I didn't feel like I needed to be anywhere else. Eventually, we pulled apart. Jamie rested his forehead against mine. Okay, he whispered. This is really good, I nodded. Yeah, it is. I didn't sleep over that night. We weren't there yet. But when I left, we didn't even talk about it. No awkward goodbyes or, we should do this again. It was just understood. A smile. A brush of fingers. A soft, later. Back in my apartment, I sat on my bed and thought about how strange it was. How easily he'd slipped into my life. How quickly I'd let him in. It should have scared me, honestly. But it didn't. Not then. Not yet. The thing about falling into something good is you don't always realize it's happening until you're already deep in it. Jamie and I weren't officially a thing, at least not in the way people like to define it. But within 2 weeks of that first kiss on his couch, we were texting daily, meeting up every couple days, sometimes for a walk with our dogs, sometimes just because one of us had a free hour and wanted to see the other. It wasn't fireworks. It was steadier than that, quieter, something that built naturally without anyone pushing for a label or asking too many questions. I liked that. But something about it started to feel off. It started small. I'd mentioned something in passing. A favorite sandwich shop, a friend from college, a weird thing Gus did as a puppy, and Jamie would nod like he already knew, like he'd heard it before, but I hadn't told him. Once or twice, whatever, people remember things weirdly sometimes, but it kept happening. Like the time I mentioned how I hated the smell of lavender detergent because it reminded me of my old landlord's gross hallway carpet. Jamie said, yeah, that building was sketchy. Before I could explain it was from years ago when I lived across town, or how he already knew Gus didn't like sirens, or that I used to play guitar in high school, or that my mom called me M in texts even though she still refused to say the word gay out loud. At first, I brushed it off. He probably saw something on my socials, or maybe I'd let some of it slip and forgot. But the details were weirdly specific. Too specific. Then came the night that really shook something loose. We were at my place. Jamie had brought over takeout, and we were watching a dumb cooking competition show. He was lying on his side on the couch, one arm tucked under his head, his socked feet pressed against my thigh like he'd lived here forever. Gus was snoring on the rug, belly up. I said, offhandedly, I had a weird dream last night. Jamie looked over. About? I hesitated. My dad. He passed, like 4 years ago. But in the dream, we were just having breakfast, talking about baseball, like nothing was wrong. Jamie's expression shifted slightly. Not surprise, not sympathy, but something more complicated. Like he already knew my dad was gone. And I'd never told him that. Not once. He sat up a little. Did you guys used to do that? Watch games together? I nodded slowly. Yeah. Every Sunday. He looked at me with that quiet, open face of his. I get that. Sometimes I dream about people like that too. It always feels more real than it should. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't want to, but because my brain was busy replaying every little moment between us, looking for a breadcrumb trail I hadn't noticed before. He hadn't asked. He'd just known. Later that night, after he left, I sat on the couch in the dark and tried to talk myself down. Maybe he'd seen an old photo frame in my apartment and figured it out. Maybe I'd mentioned my dad without remembering. Maybe my phone buzzed. Jamie, hey. Sorry if I was quiet at the end. You looked like you were somewhere else. Everything, okay? I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Yeah, just tired. Good night. He replied almost instantly. Jamie, sleep well. See you soon. I tossed the phone on the couch and leaned back, trying to ignore the knot tightening in my chest. But from that point on, I couldn't stop noticing the strange synchronicities. The way Jamie would suggest a movie I'd literally added to my watch list that morning. Or how he'd pick up my favorite snack from the corner store. The exact brand, the weird seasonal flavor. Not just something close. It wasn't a deal breaker. Not yet. But something didn't add up. Then came the last straw. It was a rainy Saturday, and we had plans to meet at his place for coffee and pancakes. I'd overslept a little. Gus had thrown up at 4 a.m., and I'd been up scrubbing the rug. I texted Jamie to say I'd be a bit late, and he replied with a thumbs up. When I arrived, he was already cooking, wearing a worn t-shirt and flannel pajama pants, flipping pancakes like it was his job. Smells amazing, I said, shaking off my jacket. Sorry I'm late. Gus had a rough night. Jamie handed me a mug of coffee without missing a beat. Yeah, poor guy. Woke you up at 4, huh? I froze. I hadn't told him what time. I hadn't posted anything. No story, no tweet, nothing. Yeah, I said slowly. How'd you know it was at 4? He paused for half a second. Too quick for most people to notice. But I saw it. He covered it up fast. Oh, you said it in your text, didn't you? I didn't. He blinked. I kept my voice steady. Jamie, how did you know that? He looked at me, eyes suddenly very still, and I realized I wasn't asking out of paranoia anymore. I was asking because I already knew the answer. He didn't answer right away. For the first time since I'd met him, Jamie didn't have that easy half smile, that calm, self-deprecating way of brushing things off. He just stood there by the stove, spatula in hand, the faint hiss of the pancakes, the only sound in the room. Mark, he started, then stopped. I crossed my arms. How did you know? His eyes flicked toward me, then away. He set the spatula down carefully, like he was buying himself seconds to think. Okay, he said quietly. Can we sit down for a second? Just tell me. I will, he said. If I say it standing up, you're gonna think I'm lying. That didn't make any sense, but my curiosity had already beaten out my anger. I sat at the little kitchen table. He sat across from me, hands clasped, elbows on his knees. You remember how I said I do contract work? He asked. Yeah, tech stuff. He nodded. That's true. I freelance for a couple of small companies. One of them builds home security and smart home systems, like doorbell cameras, pet monitors, that kind of thing. I frowned. Okay, and what does that have to do with me? Jamie took a slow breath. The week before we met, I installed one of those systems for your building's management company. They were doing a pilot program for tenants who opted in, testing out cameras at the entryway, motion sensors, digital mail alerts, stuff like that. I felt my chest tighten. I didn't sign up for that. I know, he said quickly. It wasn't your unit. It was the one next to yours. But the cameras at the entrance, they catch part of your door too. He looked down, rubbed his palms together. That's how I first saw you. You walked past while I was calibrating the footage. You had Gus with you. He was trying to eat your mail. I stared at him. You saw me on a camera. He winced. Yeah, and I shouldn't have paid attention. But I did. You looked happy, I guess. Normal. Like you weren't performing for anyone. It was just this little moment. This guy in sweatpants laughing at his dog. I hadn't seen something that real in a while. That doesn't explain how you knew what time Gus got sick, I said. Jamie's jaw tightened. After that, I started noticing you in other feeds when I was testing range. The street-level ones. I swear I wasn't spying, I just kept seeing you. And then, when I realized you went to the dog park every morning, I thought maybe I should meet you properly, not through a screen. Jamie, I said slowly, you're telling me you saw me on surveillance footage and decided to introduce yourself like it was fate? His shoulders sagged. Yeah. It sounds worse when you say it out loud. Because it is worse. He nodded, eyes still down. I know. The anger came later, but in that moment I mostly felt disoriented. Like someone had flipped my world inside out. All those coincidences, the store, the cafe, the DMV, they weren't coincidences at all. He hadn't been following me exactly. He just already knew where I'd be. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. I thought you'd never talk to me again. You were right. That landed hard. He didn't argue, just sat there, looking wrecked. The smell of burnt pancakes filled the silence. I deleted everything, he said quietly. The footage with you in it. Every single clip. I swear to you, I never saved anything, never showed anyone. After seeing you enough times, I wanted a reason to meet you that didn't make me the creepy tech guy who stares at screens all day. I pushed back my chair, the legs scraping the floor. So you made up a coincidence. I made a mistake, he said, and then I made it worse by not telling you when I had the chance. Gus barked from the doorway, as if the tension had finally gotten too heavy for him too. I bent to clip on his leash. My hands were shaking, but I kept my voice even. I need to go. Mark, I just need to go. He didn't try to stop me. Outside, the rain had slowed to a mist. I walked for blocks without really seeing anything, Gus trotting at my side, tail low. My head was spinning. Part disbelief, part disappointment, part something I couldn't even name. Because the worst part wasn't that Jamie had found me through a screen. It was that I hadn't noticed anything wrong until he told me. I'd liked him so much that I'd ignored every weird detail, every coincidence, every too accurate comment. When I got home, I threw the damp leash on the counter and sat on the floor beside Gus. He nudged my arm with his nose, like he was asking if I was okay. I don't know, buddy, I muttered. I really don't. That night I didn't sleep much. Every sound in the building made me flinch. Every time my phone buzzed, I half expected it to be him. It was. Around midnight? Jamie, I know I shouldn't text. I just need you to know I'm sorry. Not for meeting you, but for how I did it. I'll leave you alone if that's what you want. But please believe me, none of this was a game. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. I didn't reply. But the next morning at 7:30 sharp, when Gus started scratching at the door for his walk, I found myself hesitating. Because part of me wanted to see if Jamie would be at the park, and another part of me was terrified that he wouldn't. I told myself I wouldn't go. I even poured a second cup of coffee, opened my laptop, tried to bury myself in some design work. But the clock on the microwave kept dragging my eyes back. 7:28, 7:31, 7:36. Gus sat by the door, tail sweeping the floor, giving me that look that said you're lying to both of us. So I grabbed the leash. The park was wet from the night's rain. Mud clung to the grass, the benches were slick, and a thin, gray fog hung low over the field. A couple of regulars were there. The jogger with the corgi, the retired guy with the 2 greyhounds, but not him. I unclipped Gus, let him run, and tried to tell myself that the tightness in my chest was just relief, that maybe it was better this way. Then, halfway through our lap around the fence, I saw Scout. He came out from behind the water fountain first, tail wagging cautiously. Then Jamie appeared, hood up, hands jammed into his jacket pockets. He looked different, not the calm, steady version of himself I was used to. Just tired, I froze. He hesitated too, then started walking toward me. I didn't mean to ambush you, he said when he got close enough. His voice was soft, rougher than usual. Scout kinda dragged me here. Sure he did. He gave a tiny, humorless smile. He really did. He knows Gus shows up around now. We stood there in the drizzle, the dogs circling each other like they were trying to diffuse the tension we couldn't. "I didn't sleep," Jamie said finally. "I kept thinking about how you looked when you left yesterday. I've replayed that look before on other people. It's always the same mix of confusion and disgust. But this time, it actually hurt." "You don't get to make yourself the victim here," I said quietly. "I know." He took a breath. "But I need to explain something better than I did yesterday. Then I'll shut up." I didn't answer, but I didn't walk away either. He pushed his hood back, rain flattening his hair. When I took that job, I was barely keeping it together. I'd been working from home for months, hardly seeing anyone except through security feeds. It messed with me. Made everything feel distant. Then I saw you on the monitor, laughing, real. And it reminded me that people aren't just shapes moving across pixels. I wanted to feel that again. I told myself it was harmless curiosity. Then I let it become more. "That's not nothing, Jamie," I said. "That's crossing a line." "I know," he said again, the words breaking slightly. "But when I finally met you, when I realized you weren't just some guy on a screen, I stopped touching the feeds completely. I deleted the access codes that same day. I thought that if I could get to know you for real, maybe I could fix the part of myself that thought it was okay to start like that." The wind pushed a fine mist across us. My fingers were cold on Gus's leash. "You could have told me," I said, "any time in the last month." I kept waiting for a good moment. He gave a small, hollow laugh. "Turns out there isn't one." We stood there for what felt like a long time. A jogger passed us, nodding politely, and the spell broke a little. "Do you believe me that I didn't watch you after we met?" he asked. I studied his face. The eyes were red, not from crying exactly, just exhaustion. There wasn't a flicker of defensiveness in them, just something raw and stripped down. "Yeah," I said slowly. "I believe that part." Relief crossed his face, quick, fragile, but believing it doesn't fix it. I added, "You took away my choice. You built something on a secret. Even if you deleted everything, that's still what this started as." He nodded. "Then I'll own that." Scout trotted over and sat against his leg, and for a second the picture of them together hit me like it used to, quiet, ordinary, nice. It made my chest ache. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," he said. "I just didn't want you thinking you were some random experiment to me." I looked down at Gus, who was pawing at my shoe impatiently, then back up at Jamie. "I don't think you're a bad person," I said, "but you scared me. You made me second-guess everything that felt good about this. That's not something I can just skip past." He swallowed, nodded once. "Then I'll give you space." He clipped Scout's leash and turned. After a few steps, he stopped, glanced over his shoulder. "Mark, thank you for at least listening." And then he walked away, fading into the fog until only Scout's tail was visible, a brown blur disappearing down the path. I stood there until the drizzle turned into proper rain. Back home, I toweled Gus off and sat on the edge of the bed, still in my damp jacket. The apartment felt heavier than usual. Every small noise, the radiator clicking, a car door slamming outside, made the emptiness sharper. Part of me wanted to delete his number, block him, erase everything. The other part wanted to text him, just to know he made it home. Instead, I pulled the folded napkin from my nightstand. The one with the sketch of our dogs and the words, "First date vibes?" The ink had smudged where rain had caught it that night. I ran my thumb across the blurred lines until they disappeared completely. I didn't know if that meant it was over, or if it was just changing into something I didn't have a name for yet. All I knew was that I missed him. And that scared me almost as much as finding out how he'd first seen me. A week went by. I didn't see Jamie, he didn't text, didn't show up at the dog park. It was like he'd disappeared completely, which I guess is what I asked for. But that didn't mean it felt good. At first, I told myself it was for the best. I threw myself into work, cleaned the apartment like a man possessed, even called my mom back for once. Gus kept looking for Scout at the park, sniffing around like he expected him to burst from the bushes at any second. And every time I reached for my phone, I stopped short. Until Thursday night, I was coming back from the store, arms full of groceries, Gus lagging behind after getting too excited about a squirrel, when I turned the corner and saw someone sitting on the steps of my building. It was Jamie. He stood when he saw me, hands raised halfway like he wasn't sure what to do with them. "I know this is probably out of line," he said, "but I was walking Scout, and he started pulling toward your block. I didn't plan it. I swear. I wasn't gonna knock, He exhaled. "I wanted to see you." I stared at him, keys still in one hand, Gus already trotting over like he was thrilled we were finally dropping the whole act. "You've got 10 seconds, I said, before I decide this is creepy again. Jamie smiled just a little. "Okay, here goes." He stepped forward. I've thought about what I'd say all week, tried to write it down a bunch of times. But the truth is, I miss you, I swallowed. "Jamie, I know what I did was wrong," he said. "I violated your privacy, and I don't expect you to forget that. But I also know that what happened after we met was real. That you saw me, the real me, and you didn't run away until the truth caught up. I hate that I let it start with a lie, but I don't regret anything else." He hesitated, stepping just close enough that I could see how tired he looked. "I'd like a chance to start over," he said. "For real this time. No cameras. No secrets. Just two guys who met at the dog park because their dogs liked each other first." I looked down. Gus and Scout were sitting side by side again like nothing had happened, like they hadn't skipped a beat. I sighed. "You hurt me. I know. You made me feel like I couldn't trust what was good." Jamie nodded. "Then let me earn that trust back, however long it takes." I held his gaze for a second longer. Then I did something I hadn't planned. I stepped forward and hugged him. It wasn't big or dramatic. Just arms around each other, the weight of everything between us pressing into the space where our chests met. Jamie didn't say anything. He just held on. When we pulled back, I looked at him and said, "You're buying me tacos. Every week. For the rest of the year." He grinned. "Deal. And you're telling Scout to stop teaching Gus bad habits." "Impossible, but I'll try." We stood there for a beat longer, and then, wordlessly, we started walking, shoulder to shoulder, dogs ahead of us, like it had always been this way. 2 months later, we had our own routine. Tuesday tacos, Saturday pancakes, he got better at them, and walks that turned into hours-long conversations we never seemed to run out of. Jamie never brought up the surveillance stuff again. He didn't need to. I could tell he meant it when he said he was trying to be better. And honestly, he was. Sometimes people come into your life the wrong way. Sometimes they fix it. He did. And the next time someone asked how we met, I told them the truth. At the dog park. Because in the end, that's where it really started.